we've discussed correlations, or we've mentioned correlations in the past. But we haven't really described them. We haven't really talked about what makes them effective, what they mean. All you probably know at this point is that when I say correlation, you're supposed to say doesn't mean causation. When I'm talking correlation, I'm talking two variables that we are comparing. At least one of those needs to be quantitative, and we're talking about associations where we can't make causal statements, even though there may be some causality involved. We just don't have the evidence to make a causal relationship. So, for example, here in Cacioppo's et al.'s research, they're looking at the correlation between where a spouse or where you meet a spouse and marital satisfaction. Or here, data, comparing two variables, the score on well-being and the percentage of conversations rated as deep talk. And here we're seeing a correlation and our best fit line. In this case, the correlation is 0.28. So a moderate correlation, not huge, but certainly even if, you don't have to squint a whole lot here to be able to see that this is a positive correlation and going in the right direction, or the direction that you might expect. We can have correlations between two quantitative variables. So, for example, between sitting time and MTL thickness. In this case, looks like a negative correlation. And in fact, it's a somewhat stronger correlation than what we saw in the last figure, correlation of 0.37. We can look, or can correlate between vaccination status and the number of deaths per million. So on the y-axis, we're seeing deaths. On the x-axis, we're seeing vaccinations. And in this case, each of these dots stands for a state. You should be looking at this and asking yourself, is this positive, negative, or zero? And we have at least a fairly good negative correlation. We can look at world inequality, wealth inequality worldwide. And again, we're seeing a correlation here. Positive, negative, or zero. And think about what each dot stands for. And in this case, we have a positive correlation, and each dot stands for a country. Again, here we're looking at, on the x-axis, the GDP per capita for the country and the number of gun homicides per million. This is one of those correlations that we're going to want to come back to, because notice that the United States doesn't look at all like what's going on here. And so we may want to draw or think about that differently. Think about our claims. Is this a frequency claim? Association claim? or a causal claim. So this is an association claim, as are all of our correlations. Why do they only include relatively wealthy countries? And probably it's that if we included a lot of poor countries, that we're also adding a number of confounds. And so we may not be as confident in terms of what's going on, about what's going on. So we can graph associations when one variable is categorical rather than both quantitative. And most of the discussion so far, we've been looking at both quantitative, although this was our first table that we talked about, the online, or where we met our spouse, and marital satisfaction. And you see here, here is a second way that we can describe our data. We have a correlation of 0.06. We can either draw it as, sort of scatter columns, or probably the way it's typically done is here in terms of marital satisfaction, in terms of bar graphs. A correlation of 0.06 is a very small correlation. And you can see that the pattern doesn't look any different for the online people as opposed to the offline. And so I'm going to stop here for now, and I will see you in our next video, where we're talking about interrogating association claims. And take care. Bye-bye.